Hello, Dumelang. Welcome to Tomorrow Today. My name is Tlotlego Abraham. Tomorrow Today is a space for youth to engage on matters of society, matters that speak to their lives, matters that speak to their existence, matters that speak to their future. And today I want to engage you on a very interesting subject, matter of xenophobia in South Africa. But my approach to this matter of xenophobia in South Africa, I want to approach it with the lens of the concept of Ubuntu. And the reason why I want to do that is because I think the biggest problem that comes from this matter of xenophobia is the crisis of African brotherhood. And I want to take an approach to which we're going to basically establish a definition for this concept of Ubuntu and then engage on where exactly it comes from. And the reason why I'm doing that is because if you look at a majority of the response of people from different places within the continent in speaking to this matter, all their different opinions, however different they may be, they all ultimately speak to the problem of xenophobia within the context of Ubuntu. Now we know that this concept of Ubuntu, shortly defining or simply defining it, we call it I am because we are. And what invokes it is perhaps from a background or historical background during the times where South Africa was going through its liberation struggle, during the times of apartheid. And if you look at those times, the continent chose to take a position that says the problems of South Africa are not those of South Africa alone. And the problems of South Africa are basically the problems of the whole continent. And as you know, the continent was trying to move away from colonial rule. And South Africa gaining its independence in 1994 meant that in its struggle against apartheid, other African countries had to actually come in and assist them in doing that. And I think the mindset to the problems of South Africa being the problems of the whole continent, that issue comes also from what the president of Ghana said, President Kwame Nkrumah, when Ghana gained independence in 1957. And he says that Ghana may be free, but the independence of Ghana means nothing, actually, if other African countries are not free. So you then take this approach and then say, with South Africa going through what it was going through, other African countries now have to actually come in and start assisting. And you would know that they provided exiles to many people who were engaging in this struggle. Countries like Botswana, in Zambia, Mozambique, countries like Kenya. These were the people who were providing exile for the anti-apartheid movement. So the reason why I'm invoking this history is because it is a matter that we cannot ignore when we're talking about the matter of African brotherhood. If you look at xenophobia right now, which I honestly don't want to categorize it as xenophobia, this I take it as Afrophobia, because it is black on black violence. It is one African fighting against another African. And this thing does not start today, as is the problem today. It has a history right from 2008, where we had these xenophobic attacks. We had another major attack, I think, in 2015, and we had another one in 2019. In 2021, there was the issue of Operation Dudula. This time around, we have March on March. But all these things, there's a sense in which there's always someone who pays a price with their life. And we're not saying this to actually dismiss the frustrations of the people of South Africa. But we're saying that in dealing with the problems that the South Africans are currently dealing with, we actually should do that without invoking hate. So if you look at the pattern of the causes of this matter, as to what exactly led to these xenophobic attacks, you then realize that every time it will always go back to the economic frustrations of the people. It will always speak to issues of unemployment. It will always speak to them believing that these illegal or undocumented immigrants or migrants are the ones who are taking their jobs. They are dominating township businesses. That is always the argument every time. And I want to suggest that in dealing with these issues, we cannot pour the frustration of the South African people on these immigrants. Because the problems that the South Africans are facing in terms of them complaining about issues of employment and all those type of things are simply a reflection of how the South African government has actually failed to fend and stand for its people. Now the frustration, because now people occupy that level in the economy where it is lower, we're fighting for crumbs. When the economy is itself not designed to accommodate the people of South Africa. So you then find that when we talk about the 45.8% of youth unemployment in South Africa, when we talk about the 32.7 unemployment rate of South Africa, we talk about it in the context of xenophobia because people are frustrated by the fact that the government has actually failed to create those employment for the people. And therefore, in people pouring out their frustrations, they go to these immigrants and say, no, you are here illegally and you've actually taken our jobs, you've taken our businesses, and all those type of things. But I also want to suggest that one of the negatives that comes from actually chasing these people out from South Africa is when we look at the jobs that were created out of the businesses established by these very people, some of them coming from Ethiopia, some of them coming from Kenya, or wherever they may be coming from, whether Mozambique or whatever place. Now that they're actually being taken out of South Africa, the question is, the people who've actually been relying on these businesses, where are they actually going to go? You're talking about people taking your jobs. What jobs are they taking from you? In the process, these businesses being established, the consequence is the people end up being subjected to a wage system which has very low wages because they have no other place to go than to be hired in these businesses that have been established by these immigrants. So when we talk about this matter, we can then say it is very, very unfair to actually put a blame on the immigrant when the government of South Africa has failed to play its part. The other argument is that they're being blamed for the issues of crime and all those type of things. I don't have a problem with you saying you have a problem with these people being taken out because of crime. But it cannot be that the whole activity of crime in South Africa is caused by these people. It is not. If you look at majority of the people who actually are in prisons and all that, those are South Africans. So this narrative that all of a sudden, if you're going to take these people out of South Africa, is going to turn into a heaven, I don't actually agree with it. And listening to the speech by President Ramaphosa this weekend on Sunday, one of my biggest problems with the timing of the speech itself, I feel like the president was forced to respond. But if you look at him, well, based on how I look at him, if you look at his heart, I feel like he generally just agrees with what is happening because he's been very slow in terms of reacting to these problems. He's been very slow in terms of speaking against these violences. Right from the time they started, the president could have actually spoken against these things and came up with a decisive plan to actually deal with these things. So my biggest problem with President Ramaphosa's approach is that you've now allowed these march-on-march and Operation Dudula to actually determine how you're going to deal with issues of illegality. You can't allow vigilantes to determine your operations as government. And that's why I'm saying, as much as he might have spoken and said, no, we're going to ask that issues of these people be dealt with by the government, and not allowing anyone who's not within that jurisdiction to actually approach people and say, are you documented? But the issue is, his response was very slow. There's no decisive plan as to how exactly they're going to be dealing with this matter. But this whole problem goes back to the one fundamental issue I talk about almost every time, that the gaining of independence in South Africa was seen as a liberation for the people there. But it was just a gain of political independence. But it lacked economic power. Because the markets there, the economy basically, does not include those people. And as a result, until South Africa makes a decisive decision to actually have an economy that involves its people in, where policies actually serve the mandates of the people, where the politics reflects the will of the people, we're going to keep on having these things. And I worry about the position of Africa, of South Africa in the African continent, that if this is the type of response that we're going to give, I wonder what other countries are going to then do in responding to what is actually happening. I'm very curious. I'm very curious that after this whole movement in government deploying resources to take its people back to those countries, what exactly is going to be the next move of those countries? And I worry about it. Because this whole matter compromises the greatest agenda that we have as a continent, which is the unification of the African continent. I don't know. I don't know if I can suggest if there's a third party in this thing. I wonder who's actually sponsoring this thing. Is it actually sponsored by a third party, or it is basically invoked by the frustration of the people of South Africa? But for whatever reason it may be, or whatever the cause may actually be, we need to then make a decisive plan as government to have the raison d'etre of our politics to actually reflect the will of the people. And that's the approach that we need to take. So the issue of us then saying that there are people occupying offices who practice corruption and actually allowing people to come into South Africa, it is not those people who are to be blamed. It is the system itself, a reflection of the failure of that system. If we're talking about illegal or undocumented people coming into South Africa, we then must then say, the fact that these undocumented immigrants have actually came into South Africa reflects that there's a weak immigration system in South Africa. And chasing them away actually is not going to resolve anything. It's not going to resolve anything, because ultimately then it means they can still return. They can still come back in the same way in which they did. Because if at all you are saying they came in because there was someone who practiced corruption and deals were made behind it and under the table and all those type of stuff, then it means it can still happen again. That's what I'm saying. My position in this matter is that we need to come up with a decisive plan as to how we're going to address this matter. But I also want to speak to the other people of the African continent to then say, any time where South Africa is showing you hate, show them love. Because if you are going to then give the same type of reaction to them, then you are not in any way different from them. So that they can then realize and recognize that the approach to this matter is actually wrong. And so my suggestion is that we actually prioritize the unity of the continent over some of these nationalistic positions which invoke a conflict on the primary principle, which is the unification of this continent. I've tried to listen to President Ramaphosa's speech. I've tried to listen to the EFF's position as the main black opposition of South Africa. And the EFF's position is that people from other African countries are African brothers. And this type of violence that is being invoked is one that compromises the greatest or the biggest picture, which is uniting the continent. And the sad thing, as I've said before, is that someone always has to pay a price. I'm going to try and give you a bit of statistics. You can correct them. I stand to be corrected in those. In 2008, around 62 people were killed. In 2015, there were around 7 people that were killed. In 2019, around 12 people were killed. The fact of the matter is, someone always has to pay a price with their lives. Now, this type of violence, of pouring out frustration on one another and killing one another, is not going to resolve this problem. If there was any anger to be expressed, it must be expressed on the people who have taken over the South African economy. And I want to say, the fact that right now economic power is still not in our hands, we're still far from independence. What we think, this thing that we call political independence, this thing is not working for us. It is not working for us at all. Simply just because we can go on voting day and vote, and we think that we have political independence. The functionality of a political independence, as I've said, that is devoid of economic power, remains but an illusion. So that's why I'm saying what South Africans need to fight for is not to fight against their African brothers and sisters, but to fight against a system that functions with an extractive mindset, that functions with low wages against them, that has led and resulted to this high unemployment rate and these low household incomes to which they're experiencing. So ultimately, if this is our approach to the matter, and we're going to be fighting one another like this, then we're never going to solve the problem. Really, we're not going to solve the problem. So I'm appealing to our brothers and sisters in South Africa to really think much more about this matter. To say, what is the rightful way to approach this matter in a way that resolves the problem, but also does not compromise the bigger picture, which is the unification of this continent. And if this is still our approach to these problems like this, then I worry. I worry a lot about this continent. And that's why I'm saying, what then is compromised in this crisis of African brotherhood is the matter of Ubuntu. That I am because we are. A person is a person through other people. So then if we're going to chase each other away from each other's countries, we remain weak as the African continent. We remain weak. And the weakness that we're talking about here is something that will not be able to benefit us in any way. It actually makes us vulnerable to external manipulation or imperialist manipulation. And that is what countries which right now are actually losing influence in Africa, countries such as France, all those former colonizers who are losing influence in the African continent, they want us to be trapped in this crisis so that it becomes easy to actually manipulate the African continent and interfere into their affairs and continue exploiting us in this manner. This problem has made me to actually think a lot more deeper about the issue of colonialism and neo-colonialism. And I dare say, I worry a lot. I worry a lot, and I see if this is how we're going to continue in this type of trajectory. I worry a lot, and I see a recolonization of this continent. Because as divided as we are, it seems like it's so easy to actually invoke conflict between us. As divided as we are, it's easy for those people to infiltrate us and be able to achieve whatever cynical motives that they have to come and extract our minerals and exploit us in the manner in which they so are doing. So if the people who ought to be experiencing this hate is the people who continue to dominate the South African economy, the white monopoly capital, the white minority rule, the people who own the South African economy, who are enjoying the benefits of South Africa as a land. A majority of the land of South Africa is not in the hands of South Africans. The economy itself is not in the hands of South Africans. South Africans are unemployed. And in speaking against this engagements, this xenophobic happens, we're not speaking against it to dismiss their concerns. but was simply advocating for a different approach to this matter. So I'm wondering if this matter is being done in principle, to then say we're genuinely fighting against issues of undocumented immigrants. The whole issue is they're pouring out their frustration, which is a result of an economy that does not include them. Because I doubt if the economy was on their side, they would actually be continuing with what they're doing right now. The whole issue is people are taking our jobs, people are dominating businesses, people are paying low wages. Where else will they go? This is a result of the circumstances of South Africa. And I dare say, and as an establishment of my position on this matter, that the approach is wrong. And I think there's a much better way we can deal with this problem without actually invoking and imposing hate on one another. That is my position on this matter. And Ubuntu is under siege. And there's a crisis of African brotherhood. And like I said, I'm quite curious as to what the next position of these countries which have actually taken back their citizens will be. And let me tell you the dangers of dealing with this matter divided as we are. It then means countries now are going to start operating on the basis of their own plans, not taking any serious consideration into what is our continental goal. And then when countries do that, imagine a country such as Eswatini negotiating a big deal with a country like China, for instance, where the GDP of Eswatini is just a pocket change for a Chinese billionaire. What does that mean in that case? But if the continent was united, we can even negotiate bigger deals like that regionally and actually be able to get a significant share of those deals without us being exploited. And that's why I'm saying the biggest thing that is being compromised in this matter is the matter of the unification of the African continent. And that's why Dr. Kwame Nkrumah says, if we are divided, we're going to be conquered. And so I am appealing to my brothers and sisters in South Africa to say, let us find a different way to approach this matter. I was listening to a video by the Secretary General of SADC, Mr. Elias Mahos, who actually spoke on it and said, you see, this matter is a matter that needs us to realize that we need to find a way of coexisting. We need to find a way of coexisting. And I must inform you that the plans or the economic plans that we have as countries, it is inevitable. There's no how they cannot be an exportation of labor. The plans that we have as Botswana, we're going to have to export labor. The plans that we have as South Africa. So there's no how you can exist alone as a country. So we have more benefit in standing together than actually being as divided as we are at current. And so that's why I'm saying that I love the position that was given by the Office of the Secretariat, by SADC. I have not actually heard what structures like AfriForum or what DA is saying, but I'm quite curious as to what exactly is their position on this matter. I'm also curious about what the African Union has to say. If there's one other organization I'm quite worried about, and they may respond however they may to what I'm saying and labeling them. I see the African Union as a toothless dog. I see the African Union as a toothless dog because I don't understand if it still understands its mandate. An organization like that, which has around 60% of its budget being funded by the European Union and United States and all that, it's difficult for them to actually respond to problems and crises as this one. And so that's why I'm saying, ultimately at the end of the day, we remain compromised. The biggest thing that is being compromised here is the matter of unity. And so I'm appealing to all of you that we take an approach in dealing with problems like this, an approach which does not compromise the unity of the African continent. I hope that we'll look into this matter objectively Because if we become too subjective, we're going to allow emotion to take over, and emotion will cloud us on certain things which are fundamental that we actually need to observe. So I wanted to engage you on this matter today, where I wanted to express my position on the matter, to say I'm worried about what is happening in South Africa. Not so to dismiss them, but to say I think there can be a different approach to dealing with this crisis. So this is the subject matter which I wanted to engage you on today. I hope to see your comment on the comment section. I hope to see more subscriptions. And I hope to continue having these political conversations, which are necessary for the progress of our society. And I hope that we engage together. You suggest speakers, guests that we can have to come over and engage on this subject. And we'll be watching closely as to what will be happening in South Africa, the response of our regional organizations, SADC, African Union, and any other regional organization that is there in the continent. And I hope that whoever is running behind this thing, or the match-on-match leaders and all those type of things, and whatever proceedings they engaged in, they take a different approach, one that will not invoke hate, one that will not invoke violence, and people ending up losing their lives. Thank you very much. I really appreciate those subscriptions. Let's continue doing that. Thank you very much.